Okay, welcome everyone to our MnDOT Innovation Hour. I'm Carrie Workman with the Office of Research and Innovation, and I'm one of our co-hosts today for this event. And we are continuing our Innovation Hour series. And this webinar focuses again, revisiting a topic that is really central to innovation, which is human-centered design. So today we will hear from three different innovators at MnDOT. We will have a chance to watch a few learning resources, some quick videos that just highlight some information about human-centered design. And I want to upfront thank everyone again for joining. A special thanks to Stephanie Tofty in our communications and marketing unit, who is co-hosting and supporting us with all this beautiful PowerPoint deck and the technology help, the support, and in our chat. So thank you again, Stephanie. And I'm going to turn it over to you for a minute. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Before we get started, I'll read the Tennyson warning. This session will be recorded for those who cannot attend. If you have enabled your camera during this session, the recording may include your image, which is private data under the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act. You are not required to allow MnDOT to use your image, and there are no consequences for declining to do so. To opt out of the recording, simply turn off your camera. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, and we can go to the next slide. Yeah, just to kind of give set the stage for what this hour and maybe a little over an hour will bring today. We are going to do a little bit of a recap of some of our MnDOT's innovation strategy, just kind of getting grounded in the way that we approach innovation and define it. We will have a couple quick videos, as I mentioned, and point you to some resources that also exist if you are interested in learning more about human-centered design. And our three panelists today who will be sharing their work in human-centered design in three different ways. We have Aaron Arvig from the Office of Administration, who will share his work with the Ally program. Thank you, Aaron. Nissa Tupper from the Office of Sustainability and Public Health will be talking about the Complete Streets engagement kits. And Dan Sagasser, I'm sorry if I'm a little clunky there, Sagasser from MnDOT, who is going to be presenting on integrating human-centered design into MnDOT's project management office. So I'm really excited to hear different perspectives, different approaches, different goals, different needs. And that, I think, is really, it goes to the heart of what these Innovation Hour webinars try to do, which is just have some time to learn more about the ways that innovation is happening across our agency. After each presenter, there will be a pause for questions. We'll also be monitoring the chat, so feel free to ask questions through that, and we will make sure to address those. And at the end, we'll just do a quick wrap up. But thank you again for joining. And I'm going to start with just sharing a little bit about MnDOT's innovation strategy. We can go to the next slide, please. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Stephanie, we have our icebreaker. I forgot. We had a, go ahead, Stephanie.
Yep, it should be loading now. Okay.
Thank you. We did have just a quick icebreaker to get our minds thinking a little bit more about human-centered design and transportation. Feel free to submit your answer and we will just quickly revisit that. Which innovations resulted from the innovator using human-centered design? Okay. And yes, the correct response was all of the above. On-demand bikes, our modern roundabouts, and all-door boarding on buses and trams resulted from the process of utilizing human-centered design. Thank you. You know, and I want to highlight too that the next couple slides really share a little bit about some of the key concepts and principles in our innovation strategy. And one of those is a really important one, that everyone at MnDOT is an innovator. And even though this is a definition, it is an open-ended one, because innovation happens in so many different ways, sometimes without even calling it innovation or even thinking of it or labeling it in that way. So I really wanted to call attention to that everyone at MnDOT is an innovator. It is one of our agency values that is encouraged. And we're really here to try and innovate in all kinds of ways, to make our services better, to improve the way we work internally and the way we also offer our services to our public. And our definition of innovation, just as we get started today, pretty straightforward, of using critical and creative thinking to implement ideas that create value for the public and for our agency as well. So looking at that blend of creativity and critical thinking that results in innovation. And oops, I think the lights in here just went off. I'm in office today. And we have in our innovation strategy the 3E mindset, which includes empathy, experimentation, and empowerment. And in the presentations that you will hear today, you'll hear about how each of those E's connects into the work that was happening in various different ways. So really guided through that E3 mindset gives us a framework to approach innovation and to think about how we might go about improving what we do. And wanted to point out two resources. Today's human-centered design webinar is a continuation of a first webinar that was offered on this topic a couple of years ago. We have worked with a consultant named Andy Zimney, who did a great job on putting together a webinar on human-centered design that is uploaded on our YouTube channel. Again, we will share this deck afterwards so you can have access or the link to that. And included here is a new resource in our MnDOT library that it's called The Design of Everyday Things. And this book, the author of the book is also the person that in just a few minutes we will see leading us through some videos. It offers an interesting collection of looking at the function of everyday things, how they came to be, how they are made better, really goes through that process of iterating and sharing creative ideas that we probably take for granted most of days. So those all resulted from somebody's innovative process. So I encourage you to check out those two resources if you are interested in learning more. And want to thank our library for organizing the purchase of that book. And when we are revisiting today the topic of human-centered design, just really looking to share some basic information before we get started with the rest of our Innovation Hour webinar. And when we speak of human-centered design, it's really about putting people first and focusing on human experiences, thinking about the way people utilize and access those services. It looks at how we create and deliver services that reflect very diverse needs and preferences and realities. It directly applies empathy, which makes it different than other problem-solving approaches. So again, included in our innovation mindset, the empathy and the experimentation and empowerment. Human-centered design generates new ideas by starting from diverse perspectives and needs. So we will have a chance to hear more about how that connects into the real work happening at MnDOT in just a little bit. And on the next slide, we'll see just a real high-level kind of condensation of human-centered design, of the main principles, of starting with that focus on people, of really wanting to improve something on behalf of others. It focuses on solving real problems, not just symptoms, as we'll hear about in the video coming up, and it considers the interconnections in terms of approaching how to improve something. And human-centered design rarely happens, just people rarely get it right the first time. So it really encourages and emphasizes iteration and continuous learning. So those are some of the things that we're going to hear about now, and I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie in the first video. So again, the author of the book, The Design of Everyday Things. Thank you, Stephanie. I hope that the videos gave a little bit of food for thought and some context around different approaches and questions that arise in human-centered design, and focusing again on the importance of trying to understand human nature, human need, and working across systems. I think that's one thing that you will hear in different ways in each of our presentations this afternoon. So I want to make sure that we have time for to give to each presenter to share their work and their thoughts. And I believe we wanted to, before we ask Erin to start by sharing the Ally program, wanted to give you a chance to look at the guiding questions that our presenters were given before today, just as a way to perhaps organize some of what they wanted to say and also add to it. This is really, was not a mandatory set of questions, but trying to look at giving us a chance to learn about how the innovation came about. Why was the change needed? Reflect a little bit on that empathy, experimentation, and empowerment, and how that may or may not have connected into the work, as well as connecting and sharing with us a little bit more about the human-centered design process and what that looked like in each of their areas, the support and resources that they may have had or not have, and open it to anything else that they would like to share. So I'm really excited to kick off the presentation part of our innovation hour, and I'm going to turn it over to Erin to share with us about the Ally program.
Thank you so much, Gary. I really appreciate that. Let me get my bearings here as I take control of the program or of the PowerPoint. Thank you all for having me today. I really appreciate it. Erin Arvig here, Digital Accessibility Coordinator here at MnDOT. We were invited to talk about our A11Y, or also known as Ally program. It's kind of interchangeable. We're going to go ahead and talk about the program, how you can get involved, and the overlap, of course, of human-centered design and digital accessibility. Let's first chat about the A11Y Champions program. You may be wondering, what the heck is A11Y? It's a numeronym, which is hard enough to say to begin with, but it takes the first letter in a word, the last letter in a word, and the amount of letters in between. So one example might be like a peer-to-peer network or things like that. A11Y is an industry standard kind of definition of accessibility. So I know a lot of people have that question. I'll just get that right off the bat. We created this program to make accessibility learning simple, flexible, and empowering. Staff move through levels at their own pace, no deadlines, no pressure. You can choose how far you want to go based on your role and interests. The idea actually started out of a out-of-state conference in March of 2020. If any of you remember March of 2020, a pretty weird time, right? Right as COVID concerns were rising and the crowds at the conference had thinned. I think it was a Friday at 3 p.m. So I think it went from thousands of us or 1,000 of us to maybe dozens of us left in this conference because everybody was ready to get out of town. The company Intuit, probably most known for its TurboTax software, shared their internal champions program, how it started as just a really small thing and grew into something much bigger than they really expected. I kind of kept that idea in my back pocket. Again, there's a lot going on in March of 2020. I knew it wasn't the right time for this program, However, about a year later, I actually built the first iteration, which was called the Advocates Program, and that was at the Minnesota Minnesota Department of Human Services. Eventually, we customized it into today's A11Y Champions Program at MnDOT. I'm going to advance slides here. The program is built with 3 levels, so each is designed for different comfort and experience with accessibility. Level A is the beginner level, a quick 1-hour introduction that's really perfect for anyone just starting out. Level AA goes deeper. It's for people with some existing accessibility knowledge, and it is more involved, taking about 12 hours to complete. Level AAA is kind of that advanced tier. It's much more detailed. It takes about 25 hours for those who want a really strong expert level understanding. Of course, there's kind of perks as you progress the program, and we can get into that in just a second. So you may be wondering, how in the heck do I get involved in this A11Y Champions program at MnDOT? One of the easiest ways is to go into Interchange, search for A11Y Champions, and it should be one of the first search results within that search. Before you sign up, you want to be sure to check in with your supervisor, make sure they're on board, and then once approved, you can register to join the program. The registration link is located again on that Interchange page. And then each level, again, there's those 3 levels, A, AA, and AAA, have a short checklist. You want to go ahead and complete that, and you'll send it over to our team to move to the next level. There are different perks of advancing the Champions program, and they increase as you progress. One of those perks is actually getting certified from either the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, again, a mouthful, or the Department of Homeland Security, which both have certifications on digital accessibility. So pretty cool perk as you progress the program. So that's cool, Aaron, but how does this all intersect with human-centered design? We'll see, I'll show you in just a second here, but a simple way to explain it is when you follow the POUR principles. POUR is an acronym. When you follow that, you're not just making things accessible, you're designing better experiences for everyone. Again, POUR is the foundation of clean, usable, and thoughtful design. POUR is an acronym that stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So for perceivable, people need to be able to take information visually, audibly, or through assistive technology. If content is perceivable, no one is excluded before they even begin, right? Operable, users must be able to navigate and interact without barriers. So think of like keyboard access, clear controls, and predictable pathways that make the experience smoother for all. Understandable, content and interfaces should be make sense right away. Things like plain language, consistent layout, and simple cues reduce confusion and frustration. I like to think of like a decade ago when the state of Minnesota would send letters, whether it be revenue or health or whatever it may be. You'd open up that letter and you'd read it about 4 times and have no understanding of what they really wanted from you. Hence why the Plain Language Initiative was created years ago to make sure a lot of that communication is more clear for everybody. And then robust. Technology changes really quick. Our content needs to work across devices and assistive tools today and tomorrow. Designing to standards helps ensure long-term compatibility. These POUR principles actually come from the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, also known as WCAG, which we are actually required to follow under the state accessibility statute. So it's kind of interesting. This is kind of something we're encouraged to follow as well. Just let me change the slide. And then lastly, designing with people in mind. Digital accessibility is just part of good design. Human-centered approaches makes digital experiences work better for everyone by keeping real users at the center of the process. For example, some core elements shared include empathy, as we mentioned before, Maybe designers step into the user's shoes, like trying a screen reader, understand what the barriers are firsthand. User feedback, which is again very important in accessibility. Regular usability testing with diverse users keeps accessibility features practical and relevant. Again, it's easier to just make a lot of assumptions, but getting user feedback is really what helps us improve products. Inclusive design, when we build products that work for as many people as possible from the start. And then finally, industry momentum. So accessibility expectations are rising recently, lawsuits are increasing, and the testing market is growing really quick. And billions of people rely on digital content every day, so it's super important. Human-centered design leads to digital experiences that are more usable, more inclusive, and built for the real world. And that pretty much wraps up my portion of today's session. If you all do have any questions on digital accessibility or about the content we shared today, feel free to put your questions into the chat or unmute your mic. If not, our team is here to support you when you're ready. Our team email is listed on this slide. It's digital.accessibility.dot@state.mn.us. And just to remind you, messages sent to this email are shared with our full team. So we have people that are kind of professionals or experts at different things, whether that be web or PDF or document creation, things like that. So we can make sure your communication goes to the right person. I'm going to pause for a minute and see if we have any questions. And of course, I can't find the chat because, oh, there we go. I'm not seeing any questions, so I think we can keep it moving. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Aaron. And I want to mention too that this innovation was part of the 2025 innovation campaign that was done at the agency, where about 34 innovations were submitted to the campaign from different areas and districts, and this was one of them. So we look forward to learning more. I really appreciate the way you walked us through that, definitely connecting it into user experience and the importance of, yeah, just the digital world and making that accessible. I'm going to give one last call out for any questions and anything you'd like to hear more about.
If not, I'll put our
bell.
Great. I'll put our team email in the chat and then our SharePoint for more resources. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Aaron. And our next presenter, yes, thank you again, Aaron. Nissa from the Office of Sustainability and Public Health. And again, this was an innovation that was part of our 2025 innovation campaign. And the innovation she's going to share is the Complete Streets Engagement Kit. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining this over your lunch hour. Just sharing again the guiding questions that were prompting the presentations and hopefully prompting some questions from you. I will talk about our interactive engagement approach that we are supporting through our new Complete Streets engagement kits. So first, just a little bit of foundation setting. Again, Nissa Tupper, I'm with MnDOT's Office of Sustainability and Public Health. And our grounding true north for all of our work is that we know that transportation projects impact communities for decades. Often, sometimes we have once in a generation projects. So we have a true opportunity to provide some change. And we also know that the best transportation solutions support community health, help reduce emissions, and help strengthen Minnesota's future. And this really is to advance MnDOT's vision, which puts people in the center. As a reminder, our multimodal transportation system is to maximize the health of people, the environment, and the economy. So how does OSPH help us make progress, and how are human-centered design principles integrated? Well, first, know that Complete Streets is one of several function areas that the Office of Sustainability and Public Health works on. All of these function areas that you see here on the screen: resilience, reducing transportation emissions, public health and human impacts, complete streets, alternative uses of rights of way, electrification, fueling and powering, and sustainable operations. Really at the core of those is connecting people through safe, equitable, and sustainable transportation systems. These are called out independently here, but I think, an underlying theme here in this webinar today is about systems, and these are definitely all connected in different ways. And so when we talk about one, we're often pulling in one or several of the other function areas. So what are complete streets? So for those who aren't familiar, complete streets is not a single one-size-fits-all solution. It is an approach that considers the needs of all road users, whether you're walking, biking, rolling, taking transit, driving. It's responsive to local context, and it's grounded in relative vulnerability. There's a lot more I can share on that in a different webinar. If you're interested in learning more, let me know. But for today, I'm going to talk about the engagement kit. So related to human-centered design, we saw a distinct training and engagement need that led to the creation of these a few years ago from recent staff discussions when we restarted the Complete Streets trainings with staff. We were asked by several staff, it's really hard to communicate to stakeholders and sometimes even with partners, the different trade-offs that we have to evaluate. We want to communicate how Complete Streets helps advance our core mission. Number one, that's about safety. We've had a statute in place since 2013. That was in response to legislation, but there's clear misunderstandings still that persist in terms of, is Complete Streets or is it analogous with active transportation? Rather, active transportation is just one part of Complete Streets. Complete Streets also can help advance climate resilience, emissions reduction with mode shift. This isn't something that should be seen as an extra or optional. Rather, it's grounded in our core commitment, required by statute, and part of our everyday work. We also know that there's multiple audiences that are involved with Complete Streets, staff, partners, public, when we needed a more tangible way to communicate and share what's involved with a Complete Streets approach. We found, tactical learning or learning by doing is really a proven way to increase memory retention, provide better engagement with an abstract concept like this, especially when we integrate things like role-playing and scenarios, which this engagement kit does. Right street in the right place, that's really another core part of Complete Streets. It's about deeply understanding community context, community needs before we make decisions, before we decide what the solution is about our facilities and about our full right-of-way. So really, we needed a way to help facilitate and talk through understanding those trade-offs and coming to that understanding that I think it was mentioned in the video, when you solve one problem, 3 more pop up. And so it's not about finding the perfect design. It's about understanding what those trade-offs are, especially when many of our small towns, our main streets, our highways run through them and they turn into their main streets. There's a real tension between highway purpose of throughput and community needs with multimodal access along and across and economic development. There's just so many trade-offs that need to be communicated and understood. So, I think in this space where there's not a black and white solution, we really need to lean into that empathetic lens, centering people and providing a way to help iterate to design the best solution and lift up those voices of those community experts who live day in and day out in communities. So the engagement kits are a riff off of a virtual tool that some of you may be familiar with, StreetMix, which you can go online and kind of play around with different versions of street designs. So these are a hands-on way for us and our staff to lean into that empathetic design with with people, getting people to put themselves in someone else's shoes in a scenario-based setting to gain that understanding about, what matters to people. Where are they coming from? Is it about repair of a system, a facility? Is it about mode shift? What about safety? What does that mean for different people? Is it psychological? Is it physical? What happens when we elevate designing for one group over another, like people driving versus people walking? How does this project fit into the broader context of the transportation system, and more so within, the economic and cultural system of the community? So each engagement kit, which we've iterated a bit since we tested them out at our Complete Streets training, these contain persona cards. So these are where participants can put themselves in the shoes of the persona on the card that has a little bit of background about what's important to them, where they're coming from. You can use them in like a scenario-based setting. We have a number of different base maps where that context lines up with the context categories in our facility design guide, and start to play around with, what do we want this street to be? What's important to us? And start to negotiate those different street design elements, which is where, tangible piece that people want to get to. But first you have to negotiate and understand where people are coming from. So when we used these in our trainings, we had staff come forward and say, these would be really helpful in engagement opportunities or at open houses. So they can be used in more defined settings. We've used these kits in trainings for summer camps, in our staff trainings, partner trainings. You could also use them in less defined, we have an open house and you just start showing different street elements to folks and get them to share, what's important to them, and start to see those trade-offs. They're a visual, interactive way, hands-on to encourage broader participation. We tried to make sure that the terms we used were approachable for folks, so no acronyms. So each kit includes a game board style base maps with a collection of these multimodal street elements that can be used either, again, freestyle or in more defined elements. There's a kit currently in each district with the district planner that are available for checkout. And then we also have kits in our Office of Sustainability and Public Health that can be utilized. So our goal with this is really to get these out in use with the districts and with CO staff, and gather feedback over the next year, and then hopefully iterate on these based on what we learn, and also coordinate with other offices to make sure that we're updating and connecting those dots for engagement purposes. So if you'd like to stay engaged with Complete Streets, I would encourage you to visit the external website. There's a stay in touch where you can sign up for our newsletter, which goes out every other month. Otherwise, feel free to reach out. And with that, I will close. We still have time for one more presenter, but any questions in the meantime?
I have a question. I was thinking about what Aaron shared about, the origin of the A11Y program starting during COVID, and also just to have that same curiosity about when the Complete Streets work started. I know you mentioned, which is part of innovation, taking something and adapting it. So just curious a little bit about, a little bit more to hear more about that iteration process and how you made this into what is now Complete Streets would be great.
Sure. Well, I think I saw Jim Rosenau on here. So nods to Jim Rosenau. I joined in 2020. So it was literally the week that people at the state went to work from home. And so our office at the time was one of the responsibilities was taking point on the Complete Streets policy, which previously was co-owned. And I mentioned Jim Rosenau because he was one of those co-owners in the Office of Project Management Technical Support, and had led fantastic Complete Streets trainings pre-COVID that were in person. People took a bus, went to a project site. What we like to call, you do an empathy walk, and you get out there and you feel with all of your senses, what is it like to walk out here on a day where it's 100 degrees or it's rainy? What does it feel like to get in a wheelchair? So those are things that are part of our in-person trainings, but at 2020, we didn't have that. So these kits came about in as part of our second Complete Streets training. Once those came to our office, probably around 2022, I want to say, 23. And we had done a policy training when we updated the policy and just found there were still a lot of misunderstandings about what does complete streets mean and how do we define user need, because it's not clear cut, and who do we need to talk to. And so we had used Street Mix a little bit, and that's where the idea for these complete streets engagement kits came from, to use in our trainings. And from there, it just, we made some iterations based on feedback during the trainings. And that's kind of the origin story. And yeah, hope to keep evolving them.
Thank you. There is a question in the chat from Jackie. What is the recommended number of participants and age for the engagement kits?
Yeah, so I've used the kit in a very freestyle way for tabling to high school students at a career fair, just to kind of explain what do we do and what are some of the considerations. So I would say probably, but you could go a little lower than that, probably middle school. And kids are pretty smart. And we did leverage these kits for a Center for Transportation Studies summer camp, which I think was around grade 6, and they came up with some great designs and reasons for them. We have used them just in when it's a scenario-based thing. It's tables of around, I would say between 5 and 8 folks, for that engagement where people have space to talk and contribute.
Thank you. And Stephanie, I noticed you'd had your hand up. I want to make sure you have a chance to ask a question if you have one.
Great.
Yes,
Is that the question?
I just put it in the chat, but I can just read it. Is there a way to envision freight's needs using the kit? It seems like freight is always on top of other uses, and it would be interesting to see how folks solve that puzzle.
Yes, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I neglected to mention freight users as one of the multimodal users, and something that's really come to the forefront is the vulnerability of delivery drivers, and where is the space for them in our system to get out and deliver that package in a safe way and a predictable way when we think about safe system approach. So I would say that is at the top of the list for future iteration of these kits, is calling out some of those, I think prompting some of those specific questions of, what happens when we reduce the lane width here or do a bump out here, and how are we creating predictability of movement for all of our different users? When you're creating predictability of movement for people walking and biking, that's creating safety for those driving as well. And also, where are those freight routes? Do they need to use that route? Do they need to take a right turn there? So there's lots of follow-up questions that we get into in our trainings often that lean into the freight space. But yes, core to complete streets as well. We need to take a look at all those modes.
Thank you. Any final questions or additional questions? Okay. Thank you so much, Nissa. That was, just so interesting to watch the changes and to see how something like that, so tactile, makes a big difference in the planning process and the envisioning process, and really appreciated the mention of empathy walks. And our third presenter, Dan, it's going to really provide us with a glimpse into a system-wide innovation, or an office-wide commitment to human-centered design. And I was really encouraged a couple of months ago. Someone reached out from your office and said, do you have any resources on human-centered design? Because we're starting to really think about this from the very beginning of everything that we do. And that was just that was just inspiring and incredible to me. So I reached back out when thinking about what we might be able to do with this, and am really appreciative of your time, Dan, and just the effort that you are going to share with us today. So let me turn that over to you, and we will continue with our presenters.
Okay. These are the questions that we're all keeping in mind. So, hello, I'm Dan Sagasser from the MnDOT PMO, and just to de-acronym that a little bit, it's the Minnesota Information Technology partnering with the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and specifically, I'm in the project management office of that. We have been putting forth an effort to try and integrate human-centered design into our work for, I think, about the last 2 years. First, I want to cover why that's important to us. I think one of the key questions was, why did you start this innovation or change? And we saw it as really important for a whole bunch of different reasons, but I'm going to take a kind of quantitative money approach to answering this question. Is if you think about things that IT works on, a lot of those tools with MnDOT are internal facing. They face other staff, right? And so if you think about human-centered design, we're thinking about things working better for people, understanding what their problems are, understanding what works well, what doesn't, what really gives them joy working on something, what really frustrates them when working on something. And if we're working through that, people are getting, if it works better for them, it's more efficient. They're not doubling effort. Sometimes you might think about if you've ever filled out a form and you realized you filled it out wrong and you had to talk to somebody and refill it out. I mean, that's more time, and time is money. Or if there's ever been a thing that you just don't want to use because you don't like the tool. So you might procrastinate for a while before using it in the first place. Or sometimes it's just complicated to use and you spend a lot of time going through it, trying to figure out where you're supposed to be clicking. The language doesn't quite make sense. So if we think about internal tools, this is all money, right, from MnDOT, because it's people's time or resources from vendors or more supplies or equipment. It's pretty obvious why human-centered design can be beneficial. But if we think about this for public-facing things, that changes a little bit. Like we might spend time with a member of the public who's filled something out wrong and they need to fill that out, and that's still kind of a money question. But more broadly, it's not our time, it's the public's time, right? It's people being frustrated about using a MnDOT tool, or people being confused about what they're supposed to fill out, or not being able to find something on a website, or just something that isn't really targeted to what their needs actually are. And so what we're building there, instead of cost savings, is more joy in working with MnDOT, right? I mean, in a lot of these places, it's just, if there's not the frustration there, it's not frustrating working with MnDOT. It's a thing that you can do and like go in, interact with the tool, and get done with it. It's less stress. And I mean, again, we're government. Not everybody wants to interact with us all the time. Sometimes people come to us to pay some type of fee or renew a license or something like that. Like aircraft registration is a good example. But we can make it easier in the sense that people can come in, they can know that they filled out the form correctly, they can know that they've processed what they need to do correctly. And so even if they aren't coming to us with the excitement of working with MnDOT, they're at least not stressed in that they came to MnDOT. They know MnDOT is a reliable partner to work with. It's a state agency, it's a government agency that they can rely on, that communicates to them clearly, that's easier to understand, that they know what they can achieve with us, and they can move on to their next task and not be horribly stressed out and not be avoiding it. And overall, a positive opinion of MnDOT is what we're trying to create there. As I move forward, I just want to point something out. We say human-centered design, and a lot of organizations sometimes latch on to a specific word around like user experience or human-centered design or usability testing, and they kind of just use that to describe everything. And I would say a lot of times when we talk about human-centered design here, sometimes we actually mean user experience or customer experience, right? And human-centered design is having empathy, trying to figure out where people are coming from, trying to understand that, trying to get in their shoes, trying to figure out what it is they need, what frustrates them, what do they really enjoy doing as part of this process. And UX, CX, thinking about that more as, and I'm simplifying this a lot, but more of like, where should the button be placed? Is the button the right color? Is the navigation set up in a way that people standardly kind of understand? But I wanted to explain that because as I move to the next slide, I am going to mention some customer experience things that we're working into. But our journey so far, we hired a coach. Her name is Tammy. She was wonderful. She was with us for a couple of years. We did training for the whole project management office in human-centered design, which was, I think, kind of eye-opening for a lot of new people. It was an interesting new thing. And we also had a group that was the pilot group that went before any of those folks and did much more intensive training for, I think, about a year and a half, if memory serves. And that group is kind of functioning as the direction setting group. How are we going to really integrate this into our work? What groups of people, we have project managers, business analysts, quality assurance specialists. What part of the work, how are we going to divide up the labor? Who's going to do what? And how do we make sure this still works going forward? How do we get people ready as they get into it in the first place? Right? Because we're not assuming that everybody in MnDOT is familiar with this. So we think we're going to need to do a little bit of onboarding as we go. So we've done this in a few projects so far. The interchange had this as a portion. The public website has this as a much larger portion. I was actually just in a meeting about that a few hours ago, and making sure people are integrated into this design process and understanding what the new website is going to be and how it's going to work is a really big part of this. What else? Let's see. We've been doing some customer experience metrics. Again, CX coming in. We've been doing CX metrics in several of our different projects. The freight network optimization tool was a really interesting case in working human-centered design in. We figured out some interesting stuff when we reached out to the public and started talking to people. I think there was a bit of a realignment of who would use the tool for what. It was really eye-opening. So we'll continue to use it on many more projects. And as we move into the future, I think the big transition is, in a few years, if I or someone else is doing this presentation again, we're not going to say, here's the projects where we worked human-centered design, and it's going to be, we did it in everything or almost everything. We're really trying to get it into more and more projects and not just in kind of introductory ways, but trying to incorporate it more and more and more. That pilot group that I mentioned before, the folks who did the really intensive training for human-centered design, they're working on a roadmap. We have a roadmap already, but they're working on constantly refining the roadmap so we make sure that we're continuing to move forward. Refine it every 6 months or so to make sure we're keep moving forward, keep working it into projects, keep doing more and more human-centered design in what we do. Building a knowledge repository, right? We're going to have new people that come on board with this. We're going to have new sections of the agency that haven't worked with this before. And success metrics. That's kind of an important part is we want to make sure that we're not just trying this out, right? Eventually, we're going to need to say, how do we quantify that things have gotten better? And there are ways to do quantifiable stuff with human-centered design, but we really want to start to kind of document what our journey is and how we're improving as we go. And I don't think it's on this slide, but I think the other thing is, I mentioned I'm in the project management office. I think we want to start expanding beyond just the project management office too. There's interest from the other folks in MnDOT, so to expand to other groups, so it's beyond just the project. So after the project is launched, it will continue on, right? Because if you're going to do things iteratively, it isn't just as you're launching that you want to do things iteratively. It's you want to keep checking because people's needs change over time. So tools, resources, websites always need to keep updating as they go to make sure they're continuing to meet the needs that people have. And I could go into much more detail about all of that, but I really wanted to make sure I leave enough time for questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Dan. That was illuminating and so multifaceted. And I appreciate the contrast in terms of using it as an approach. I guess the only question I have was maybe what resistances uh, did you encounter, if any?
Oh, I mean, I think the biggest resistance is sometimes we get a little locked into how we've been doing things. And I don't mean that as individuals. Sometimes it's just the structure of the organization and how things work. It can be kind of hard in the land of allocated money, right? Say that you have federal money or money from a specific state law that says, here's the block of money, it is to be spent by this period in time. So after that period of time, you have to find new money or new avenues to continue to make that iterative change, right? You might have users who come in and, well, you did your human-centered design in the project and you learned what people thought they might want it for. Once they actually have it and have started using it and the user base starts to really grow and grow, you probably are going to figure out that there's new needs that they have and that they didn't know about before and you didn't know about them before. I mean, I think that's just a challenge in how we do stuff and to can figure out how to work that iteration in going forward.
Stephanie, I see you might have a question.
Hi, Dan. I'm really curious about your human-centered design coach, Tammy, and maybe if you could share one of the biggest takeaways, something that you learned from her that maybe changed the way you viewed the work that you do.
I mean, my hope and my observation is that I think everybody had kind of different takeaways from what Tammy had. I think learning that empathy piece is, how do I put it? It's not like we weren't taking the user's needs into consideration before. But I think a revelation a lot of folks had is there's a difference between talking to the business unit about what the users need, or just doing maybe a quick survey and really sitting down and talking to people to try and figure out that they might be annoyed by a thing, but figuring out the motivations behind that is actually a lot deeper. They might think they need to fill something specific out, and you realize the actual issue is they didn't understand what the thing they needed to fill out in the first place even was. Like maybe an education thing was totally necessary, or maybe you were just using the wrong word and everybody thinks about it in a different way. So all kinds of things like that about the importance of empathy and trying to understand where people are coming from.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think we've all had experience of frustration with using forms or trying to interact with things. So I feel like a collective sigh when I learn about things like this, and really appreciate your time today to walk us through some of the things that your office is really taking to heart and putting into action. Yeah. And towards our end of our hour here, I do have a couple calls to action. One is, we've heard from our first presenter, Aaron, please go to the interchange if you are interested or contact him directly about participating in and signing up for the A11Y or the Ally program for accessibility. That is one way to continue to learn and connect with innovation. We will be doing an in-person demo of the Complete Streets Kit 2 weeks from now on on August 19th. That event, NISA will be doing a demo and just giving a chance to learn about it up front and in person. That event will be held in our library at CO from 1 to 2. You can contact me directly if you have any questions about that, but I hope to see you there. And finally, MnDOT has an innovation community of practice. So anyone on this webinar today, it is open to any MnDOT staff. It is really a group that is taking form now. Some of you on the call today are part of this. It's a wonderful group to be a part of, to be able to learn and connect and share. The agenda is collectively formed, so it's really defined by what the group's needs are, and creating experiences like this of common points of connection where we can learn and share and ask questions, and feel supported as we continue to build a culture of innovation at MnDOT. The next meeting, and it is usually hybrid, is on September 23rd from 1 to 2. Please contact me if you would like to be added to the members list, or even if you just want to join that meeting. You're welcome to experience that and decide if you would like to continue on as part of that group. We usually meet every other month, like I said, we are just forming and starting to collect our ideas and get our directions going. So really invite you to participate in that. And thank you again for taking the time to participate, share, and attend our innovation hour. We are always really inspired. I can already see a human-centered design part 3 innovation hour just based on all of the incredible information that was shared today in so many details. So I'd love to have a last round of thanks for our presenters and appreciate everybody's time today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you again. Hope to see you at the demonstration for the Complete Streets Kit soon. Take care, everyone.